This is one of those videos where I want to zoom out a bit, not literally because there's no one behind the camera, but conceptually. I'm going to be mentioning specific video games here, but only for the sake of illustrating a larger point about the current cultural moment we find ourselves in, at least in regards to video game animation. Basically, playable cartoons are a thing now. There are now video games that so expertly combine visuals, animation, and gameplay that they actually make you feel like you're participating in an animated TV show, or at least that's how it feels for me. And I worry that we're in danger of getting used to this so quickly that we could also forget to acknowledge what a special moment this is. This is a big deal for video game development. It's a big deal for animation, and it's also a big deal for all of us folks who buy and play games. And last I checked, I think that's most of us. First, let's hammer out a few details. So, what do I mean by playable cartoon? Well, I basically mean that it's just a video game that presents itself as being nearly indistinguishable from a work of contemporary animation. Now, the games that I'm going to point to here, they don't look exactly like animated TV shows or movies. For one thing, the camera angles are video game camera angles. Shows and movies can get much more creative with their camera angles, but in games, you really need to prioritize just player comfort and general practicality. And then there are the HUD elements, the UI elements on the screen. Most cartoons do not have health bars floating in the corner of the frame. But aside from all that, when it comes to many of the other elements like character design, composition, backgrounds, the animation itself, and even like special effects, these games show many similarities to the work of industry-leading animation studios, and in certain cases, playable cartoons might even exceed the work of those studios. Also, we could argue that playable cartoons, by this definition, have actually been around for quite a while, in some form, for decades even. For example, point-and-click games, or what used to be known as adventure games in the olden time. Humongous Entertainment, LucasArts, Sierra, some of the more advanced games in this category from these studios, back in the 90s specifically, were darn close to just looking like cartoons, and they were afforded this level of visual whimsy and clarity because, well, these were 2D visuals, and not everything on the screen had to animate at the same time, so it wasn't ultimately all that taxing on the CPUs and the video cards. But at the same time, and this is very clear to see looking back, these games still had obvious limitations. This is not what 90s television cartoons looked like. Trust me, I was there. And through the aughts and the early 2010s as well, there were plenty of games, especially 2D indie games, that continued down this path, kind of getting us closer to where we are now. But in my opinion, it's only in the last 5 to 10 years that a number of different factors have aligned to make playable cartoons possible. For one thing, the tech is here now. We have the tech we need to make this possible. We have the tools to create both 2D and 3D assets in a wide range of art styles, and the hardware that we own to play this stuff is capable of rendering and animating these assets in real time without melting any components in the process, at least most of the time. Next up, I feel that more game studios, both big ones and small ones, have embraced the value of strong and unique art direction. So this bit is speculation, of course, but I feel that the reason behind this is a combination of genuine creative interest in creating compelling visuals, and also just very practical, business-minded decision-making. So not only are there plenty of creative people working at these studios right now, ready to share some really bold ideas, but there are also other team members who recognize that unique visuals represent a really valuable marketing tool in the current video game landscape. Games that look different, they stand out in showcases, they stand out in YouTube thumbnails, and they stand out on digital storefronts where thousands of new games are vying for the attention of just players and also press people. And the last big factor I want to touch on is the general knowledge that there are lots of adults and teenagers who like and appreciate quality animation. Animation, even just specifically 2D animation, does not automatically mean that a property is for children. I mean, heck, that's one of the main things that I have been talking about here ever since I started the channel. Animation fans who are also adults are still a relative minority within the general population, I would say. But that's likely to change as we millennials and Gen Zers age up, because for us, it's not weird at all to continue to watch cartoons or continue to play video games as adults. The result of all this, in my view, is that we're now getting some of the most impressive video game animation, period. And certain games make me feel, they really do make me feel like I'm playing a TV show. And I find this whole situation just incredibly, stupidly exciting. The big recent game that brought this topic to mind was, of course, HiFi Rush. As soon as I saw the trailer for that game, I knew that I did not need to make a video about it. And I was 100% right. The rest of the internet has that one covered just fine. And I agree with what folks have been saying about it. It's a stunning piece of work. It's just excellent. Gameplay aside, and don't worry, the gameplay is lovely too, but gameplay aside, this is like industry-leading character animation. Cell shading itself, that's nothing new. The comic book look is nothing new, but the execution here, the way that everything comes together, is just the best. And coming back around to the point, there have been plenty of moments while playing through this game when I've just thought, okay, like this is a movie. It just feels like a movie. And that's the kind of interplay that I'm talking about here. At least visually, the lines are starting to blur between these two different mediums. I also brought up this idea in a video that I did however long ago about a game called Lost in Play, which is a lovely little point-and-click deal that leaned hard into a look that feels very much like contemporary Cartoon Network work. And there's no way that I can get through this whole video without at least mentioning Have a Nice Death as well, which I guess is officially released now. It was in early access for a long time. I've talked about the game before, but as more gets added to the game and the more that I play it, my appreciation just continues to grow. There are times when the detail and the flourishes are almost too much. Like, I'll just get caught up staring at the backgrounds or like repeating a certain character action because I'm just trying to like absorb and understand every detail. But importantly, the team behind that game did not prioritize the visuals over the gameplay. These two elements swim together side by side. This is one of the best controlling games that I have played. Controls have been an issue with certain other games that have beautiful cartoony visuals. In particular, I've seen this with certain indie games that feature either like, sketchbook art or like claymation visuals. It just seems to take way too long to call up each animation after triggering it, which leaves the game feeling unresponsive, which is not great if it's a platformer or an action game. But somehow, Have a Nice Death does it all simultaneously, and it does it beautifully. So the more playable cartoons that we get, the more I start to feel like this is a pattern and not just a temporary trend. I'm not trying to say that playable cartoons are going to become like the new norm for the video game industry. That is not where this is headed, but I do think that we're set to see a whole lot more of these. And for people like us who follow animation and who argue about anime on the internet and who watch Puss in Boots frame by frame, that's really great news, especially because of the sheer number of games being produced right now, especially on the indie side of things. Because in a general sense, there's probably a lot more money in video games than in professional animation, which is, I don't know, that would have sounded crazy a while back, but I think it's true. And typically, when there's a lot of money in something, it tends to attract more people. It tends to attract the creation of new work. It's a really fertile time for video game animation, and I think it's worth taking a moment to just appreciate the crazy good work that's happening right now. In fact, I've come to think that this is something the internet, and more specifically YouTube, is really good for. Just tracking the trajectories of different trends, different forces, and different communities. 20 years from now, I'm telling you, your great goddaughter is gonna come up to you and ask about the rise of playable cartoons, and you're gonna be able to say, "Oh yeah, I think I watched a video about that a while ago. Don't remember who made it though. Just some guy." Thank you so much for joining me. If you're interested in animation or just general media studies topics, talking about the entertainment that we're consuming all the time, highly recommend checking out some of my other videos. You can subscribe if you really want to. Until next time, I'll just say thanks for stopping by.